What is happening, all 100,000 of you peaceful LARPers out there? Welcome back to the channel. Today, we're gonna be taking a look at the Sig Spear LT, AKA the MCX on Ozempic. But before we get into talking about the sexy peanut butter sandwich that is the Spear LT, we just have to take a moment and thank our biggest channel sponsor. Guys, the channel is very grateful for our sugar daddies over at brownells.com. So if you guys want to support the channel, head on over there, show them some love, use bro code RDB10. It saves you 10% off an order of $150 or more. That code is unlimited, so you could use it as many times as you want, share it with your friends, buy a weapon light, spread that discount code, not FUD lore, and support the channel at the same damn time. Now, before we get into the specs on this specific SBR, which SBR stands for shouldn't be a rule, because short barrel rifles should be legal for everybody. But before we talk about the specs on this thing, we have to talk about what is my relationship to Sig and our full disclosures. And it's a funny one, actually. So I paid full price for this pistol as it came from the factory and immediately took it to my local FFL where they checked the torque on the barrel screws that actually secure this barrel to the upper receiver group, and they were not to Sig's own specs. So I made a YouTube short kind of calling out Sig on that, and they reached out to me via email, said that they were aware of the issue. I called the customer service guy. He said they're working on it. That's a very rare occurrence, although as we saw on many of these early on, that wasn't so rare. And then I asked them to put me on the cool guys list for pre-release products, and they stopped replying to my emails. Now I gotta turn my back. Safe to say, I have very little to no relationship with Sig. I paid full price for this rifle, and so I'm gonna tell you exactly how I feel about it. So what makes the Sig Spear LT special? Because to the untrained eye, it may just look like another AR-15, and it keeps a lot of the good things about the AR-15, like your fire controls over here is all pretty much exactly the same. And there are some differences between the old generation MCX and the new Sig Spear LT that give it even more in common with the AR-15, which a lot of people are very happy about. Unless you own an old model, then you're probably crying right now watching this video. Otherwise, you're happy that it can take AR-15 triggers, so on and so forth. But what makes it special is actually the recoil system. Now, the Sig Spear LT is the little brother to the Sig Spear, which Sig designed specifically for the NGSW military trials, which it did win with their new 277 Fury round, because according to the military, the 5.56 has kind of reached its pinnacle of existence, and they're looking for a new caliber. Now, Sig, being the smart, innovative company that they are, they actually saw the writing on the wall, because it's going to take decades if the 277 Fury really ever does take off on the commercial side. And so what do? They kind of shrunk that platform down into a 5.56 version, which is much more realistic for consumers to purchase. Now, it is very similar to the Sig MCX versions 1 and 2, the first and second generations, but it doesn't have interchangeable parts, which may upset a lot of those previous MCX owners. However, it does keep a lot of those good features that you like about the MCX and improves on it, actually. So what does the Sig Spear LT bring to the table that you can't get out of an AR-15? Well, because of its piston system, the short stroke gas piston system that you have here, it actually allows this thing to be much more effective when you're running it suppressed and on shorter barrels. The biggest downfall of the AR-15, which is also one of its biggest upsides, is that it is a direct impingement gas system, meaning you have hot gases coming from the glass block back into your action, dirtying up the gun, especially when you're running it suppressed, because this is acting as a big parachute, catching all of your gases. And so when you're running a DI system, a lot more of that gets back into the operating system, dirtying it up faster, creating reliability issues, and also just getting gas in the shooter's face. Now, when you have a short stroke gas piston system, as you have with the Sig Spear LT, it actually allows the shooter to go with a lot shorter barrel length and run it suppressed without having a lot of those same issues that a DI system has. Now, one of the downsides that you're gonna have is the weight in the front of the gun. As always, we're gonna start blasting the acid and talk about what makes the Sig Spear LT so unique and why you may want or may not want to look into purchasing one of these rifles. So up front, right at the beginning, we have a little bit of a modification that I made to the rifle. We are running a Surefire 3-prong suppressor because I wanted to run my Surefire RC2 on this gun. It does come with Sig's own flash hider for Sig suppressors. What I will say is that I have very little experience with those Sig flow-through suppressors. However, what I've heard from just the general consensus is they're very good suppressors, but the flash hider itself is not very good. So I've never actually even shot one round through this gun with that flash hider that comes with it on here, so I can't speak to how well that muzzle device is. But we are running a Surefire 3-prong on here. What I will say is it has a tapered barrel, so if you do want to install your own muzzle device, you will need to reach out to Sig to get that little taper adapter there so you can put your own muzzle device on here. They used to ship them with them in the box, and as far as I know, they stopped doing that. But if you reach out to Sig, they should send you one for free, as they did with me, without mentioning the channel whatsoever. I just called them, asked them if I could have one for my new Sig Spear LT, and they sent it out. So now what I will say is One of the most advantageous things about going with a short stroke gas piston system like the Sig Spear LT is that if you are going to run it suppressed in a shorter barrel length configuration, it is going to be much more pleasant to shoot than, say, a direct impingement gun like an AR-15 or like the Mark 18 or the URGI even, because there is less hot gas traveling through your operating system, fouling up your components on the inside, so you're gonna have better reliability. The gun is gonna remain cooler over longer strings of fire. And with the added weight of the suppressor on the front of the gun, as well as the operating system, it does make for a very pleasant and low recoiling shooting experience. Now we'll talk about how I have this thing kitted out at the end of the video, but for right now, let's just talk about the Sig Spear LT itself. So moving back from the muzzle device, we do have an 11.5 inch cold hammer forged chrome line barrel on this thing. We've already talked a little bit about the operating system, but we haven't talked about the adjustable gas block that this thing does have. So it doesn't have a ton of gas settings on here, but it has a normal and an adverse gas setting. So if you guys can see over here on the right side of the gun, you see the plus back here with the arrow down. So if, right now it's on the normal gas setting, and if for any reason the gun was super dirty or it was fouled up, it was just from just not cleaning it for thousands of rounds, you could flip this guy right over using either a bullet or your hands. And let's see if I can get it. Right now we're on camera and it's a little tight. There we go. I just was able to pop it over with my hands, and now it is in the adverse gas setting. So it does have an adjustable gas block, although it's not truly adjustable for fine tuning the operating system, but I have had no issues running it with the Surefire RC2, which is one of the most popular baffle stack, traditional suppressors on the market today. So if you're running a flow through can, you obviously don't need to worry about that as much, but just know full size can, 11.5 inch barrel, with the current gas setting, it's running perfectly fine. Now the ejection does go from about a 3 o'clock to a 2 o'clock when I put the can on there. But again, that is a totally reasonable change to have when you add a full size suppressor to a gun. Now moving back from there is one of the biggest changes from the previous generation MCXs to the LT, and we have the handguard. It's been redesigned, and so that it's actually a lot lighter, a lot slimmer. It still is a little bit taller than a traditional AR-15 handguard because of that operating system that they have to squeeze into there, but they have also added some screws on the back here, because one of the biggest complaints from LE and military guys who are running lasers, IR laser aiming devices on the front of the rails here on the previous generations were that they were not holding zero. And so according to Sig, they made this change to this design in order to allow for any kind of IR laser aiming device in the front to keep zero. It's just 2 screws on the side, very simple design, but that's gonna allow people to run their lasers up front and not worry about it shifting after shooting or heavy use. Now moving back from there, much like on the previous generations, Sig has a few things that you might not notice on an AR-15. These parts right here that look like they're interchangeable, it's because they are interchangeable. Again, this was designed to be a military weapon, so although most civilians will never run through enough rounds to ever need to change out some of these parts, there's a lot of different parts like these little clips back here where your charging handle rubs over. I don't even know what you would call that piece there. Your brass deflector, your forward assist, all of these parts are completely removable, so you can change them out if you're just running a train on these things and just shooting hella rounds through them, which most civilians will never need to worry about. But it keeps that capability from the previous generations to the current generation. Now we'll stick on the upper receiver group here. One of my least favorite things about this upper receiver group is the charging handle, about this whole rifle in fact. It's a very flimsy and cheap feeling charging handle. Although it does work, it is 100% ambidextrous. It does feel like that could be something, an area of improvement. Not a huge fan of it. Feels a little chintzy and cheap. And I feel like I'm gonna break it, honestly, anytime I pull it. So that is the one thing I really dislike about this thing, and I will likely be switching this out for a Geisley or a Radian charging handle for the Sig Spear MCXs. Now, while we're on the topic of the upper receiver group, the BCG, the whole operating system looks good. There's no abnormal wear on it, and we've put quite a few rounds to this thing. We're coming up right about on 1,000 rounds through this exact Spear LT, and everything is to be expected. In fact, it is very little wear for the amount of rounds we've put through it. We've gotten it very hot. We've shot it till it's too hot to even hold at some points, and this thing has performed phenomenally well. So no abnormal wear in that respect. Now, if you guys notice, this lower does look very similar to an AR-15, but this is actually one of my favorite things about the Spear LT. It is 100% ambidextrous, meaning you can lock the bolt back to the rear from the right-hand side of the gun, so you don't have to remove your hand from fire control. You can just lift up on this lever, pull the charging handle back, and it locks it to the rear. Again, that is great for clearing malfunctions, double feeds. You never have to take your shooting hand off the gun, obviously, and for reloads, if you're doing an emergency reload, you can just stick that baby right in there, throw that forward, similar to like what a bad lever would do for you on an AR-15 lower, but it's just built right into the gun. And this is the type of ambidextrous bolt release that I prefer. The swipe, I don't like the one that you push, like the ping pong paddle on the right side of the gun. That is because I have to really break my grip and come off the gun to hit some of those ping pong paddle type ambidextrous bolt releases. Whereas on the swiping method here, it's just a real quick up and down, and it just feels a lot more comfortable to me. Now on the other side of the gun, as you guys can tell, completely ambidextrous magazine release as well, and the same for the ping pong paddle, the bolt catch bolt release. Same thing on this side of the gun. Safety selector is completely ambidextrous as well. I like what Sig has done, although I do prefer a 45-degree angle on the safety selector. It is 90-degree here, but they made it a little bit short on the right side of the gun. Obviously, 95% of people buying these guns are right-handed, so it's not in the way when you're running the gun fast or anything like that. It's not a hot spot. It doesn't touch your index finger when you're shooting the gun. So I do love that they put the shorter side on the right side of the gun. Lastly, the magazine release on the right side of the gun is much more of an oversized, elongated magazine release compared to a typical AR-15 mil-spec magazine release. I really like that thing because it gives you just a little bit more leeway up and down and where you can press that. It's in the same exact place as an AR-15, but it is a little bit larger and it makes it very easy to articulate. Now, while we're on the subject of the lower receiver group, let's talk about the magazine well. It has a nice flared magazine well, as much as you really could really ask for. I know there's some aftermarket companies like PMM that make magazine wells for these things, but I don't think it's necessary if you train these reloads. Obviously, it's not going to hurt to put an aftermarket mag well on there, but I am very happy with the way Sig has naturally flared out these mag wells. It's 2024, guys. There's no reason the company can't flare out a mag well on a lower receiver. So last thing on the lower that we'll talk about besides the grip is going to be the trigger, guys. This trigger is pretty darn good. And the main reason the trigger is pretty good is because you can swap it out for a Geisley. But in all fairness, I love Geisley triggers. I'm very biased. I'm very used to Geisley triggers. But this trigger is not bad. It is a single stage trigger for a stock trigger that would come in a gun. It is better than a mil-spec trigger that you might get in a Daniel Defense gun. It is better than that, but it's still not my favorite. It is kind of a hybrid between a flat shoe and a rounded shoe, and it's got a little hook on the bottom. Again, very good for just coming with a gun, but the gun isn't cheap either, so it would have been nice if they just threw a Geisley in there and saved everybody some time. But I am going to be replacing this trigger with a Geisley eventually. I just wanted to bring this review to you guys with as much stock on this rifle as possible. We do have an oversized trigger guard here, which is pretty nice. So if you're wearing gloves or something like that, it is built right in. There's no way you could replace this, but it is plenty big. I have large hands, but if you're wearing gloves, it's got enough room for you to kind of stick your finger in there and, you know, do what you need to do. Moving back from there, the Sig pistol grip, it is pretty good. I wouldn't say it's my favorite. I still like the K2, but it does have an aggressive grip angle, which I do prefer, more like the K2 from Magpul or the Reptilla, but it does have a little bit more of a hump than I like in the back. But overall, it's a pretty good pistol grip. Again, with the trigger, that might be one of the other things I change out because they're so cheap, and I like to have as much continuity amongst all my weapons platforms as possible, and I run K2 grips or Reptilla grips on all my other rifles. So it just makes it a little bit easier to train with different platforms when you have the same accoutrements on those platforms. So once again, this will probably get changed out along with the trigger. Now moving back from there, we have one of my all-time favorite looking stocks, the JMac armbar. This is their 9-inch armbar, so a little bit longer than the stock that comes with the Sig Spear. And again, I bought this as a pistol, so it was the same price as the Form 4 SBR, but I didn't get the stock with it because I wanted to have a quicker path to getting the review to you guys. Unfortunately, the BATFE, always taking fun, completely took their time and it took like 6.5 months for my Form 4 to get processed. I had to call the ATF. So I want to take a moment to kind of take a sidebar here and talk about the ATF and how tyrannical and ridiculous and how they have no accountability whatsoever. So I actually bought this as a pistol in order to try to bring this review to you guys faster, because a Form 1 is obviously most of the time faster than a Form 4. So I bought it as a pistol. It was $2,500, did not come with the stock. So I had to come out of pocket for the JMac, worth every penny. But I submitted my Form 1 7 months ago, and I called the ATF about 6 months into the process. I said, hey guys, why is this not approved yet? It took 25 days for my last Form 1 to go through. And they're like, oh, it's the FBI NIC system has you on delay. So I hung up with them. I called my local congressman, Chip Roy, and I told them what was going on. They were able to assist me in kind of pressing the gas and lighting a fire under the ass of the ATF and the FBI. They got answers really quickly. Surprise, surprise. It took an act of Congress for the ATF to get my Form 1 back to me, but we finally got it back, luckily, with the help of Congressman Chip Roy. So big shout out to Congressman Chip Roy. And if any of you guys are dealing with this bureaucratic bullshit with the ATF or the FBI, I highly encourage you to reach out to your congresspeople and have them light a fire under their ass, because they have to be accountable to the tax-paying citizens of this country. It's already a ridiculous rule, but again, I digress. We'll move on from there. Let's talk about how sexy this JMac stock is, guys. I love the anodizing on this thing. It is a little more gaudy of a gold, but this is like the 50 shades of FDE build, so it turned out really incredible. A few black accents here and there with the accoutrements, but overall, mostly FDE. And the reason I love this stock is because it has that cheek riser, and then it also has the option to put an additional cheek riser on here for when you're running some 1.93 mounts on here. That cheek riser makes a huge difference, and it just makes it so much easier to get your dot and get a comfortable cheek weld. Obviously, it's not as good as like a B5 SOP mod or a gunfighter or anything like that, but it is going to get you 90% of the way there in keeping your dot and keeping quick follow-up shots on target. So it's got a nice rubberized butt pad. That is not for comfort, that is just for grip. It is like the hardest rubber you've ever felt. It just feels like steel, but at least when you're shouldering the rifle, it sticks in there pretty good. It doesn't want to slip out. It gives you that grip in the back. So very, very solid stock here. I am a huge fan of this thing, and it's got QD points in the front here as well as in the back. And as far as the folding mechanism goes, this is one of the older Sig 1913 folding mechanisms that I bought from JMac years ago, and it doesn't have that locking mechanism, but it just folds down super nice. And then you can obviously shoot this thing while it's folded. That's part of the perks of the short stroke gas piston system, is that you can shoot it folded, and it's all internal, contained up here in the upper receiver. So it's just a 1913 rail in the back, so you could really put whatever stock you want on here, or pistol brace for that matter. But once again, just a super sexy compact setup right here. Could fit in a larger backpack very easily. With all that being said, we've kind of covered everything that the Sig Spear LT comes with, and we'll talk about the attachments as we go. But before I do, I want to talk to you guys about how fun this thing is to shoot. So the first thing you'll notice when you grab the Sig Spear LT is that it is a little bit front heavy, especially with a lightweight stock on the back. Obviously, you know, you could put a heavier stock on here to have it feel a little bit more balanced and not feel so front heavy, but then overall your weight's gonna go up and you're gonna be fatigued as well in that sense. So I like that this is lightweight in the back, but it does add a bit of a stress factor on the front end of the gun, especially when you put a suppressor on there, makes it a little bit heavier. That front end weight makes for a super light recoiling and quick follow-up shot gun. So this gun, when you're shooting it fast, is where it really excels. And again, do I recommend you get one of these in a 16-inch variant? Personally, I do not. I don't see the advantage of going with a short stroke gas piston system on a 16-inch gun. I hold to that, especially and even including on my MR556. I kind of see that gun as more of a waste now, because I realize that it is just so much weight out in the front, and you're not really gaining any particular advantage over these highly functioning, highly machined, highly reliable AR-15 systems. Whereas these short stroke gas piston systems really shine is on these shorter barrels with a suppressor on there. And it does make for a completely pleasant and fun shooting experience. So although you do have a little bit more weight in the front, it is going to be well balanced, especially once you start shooting. Now, I've been wearing kit all day. I'm wearing level 4 plates and my Cry JPC 2.0, and I've been running this thing for about 4 hours straight. And every other time I've been out here, I've run this thing pretty hard. I've run it in classes, I've run it out to distance, and everything about this gun, being that it is so short, makes it very manageable, although it is slightly front heavy compared to a DI gun. Now, the recoil impulse is very linear and predictable. When I think of recoil impulse, I'm not thinking about having no recoil, because no matter what gun you're shooting, what caliber you're shooting, you're gonna have recoil. And I don't run brakes, because brakes are not good in a team environment and they give away your position. Every gun that I kit out is for a serious duty use scenario. So I'm not gonna be running brakes on any of these guns. These aren't competition rifles. These are for a real use situation. And flash hiders are just much, much better than brakes in a team environment at nighttime. For many other reasons, besides reduction of recoil. Now, when you put a suppressor on there, obviously it doesn't matter as much. And so what I'm looking for in a gun is not a zero recoil, it's a predictive recoil. Now, this thing does have a very light recoil impulse, but the recoil that it has that remains is very predictable. So that leads to fast follow-up shots. You can do build drills very quickly and very accurately. Now, speaking of the accuracy, let's talk about this gun and how it grouped. So we shot this with some 77 grain AAC ammunition at 50 yards, where this EOTech 2-dot reticle likes to be zeroed, a 15-200 yard zero, and we were getting about 1 1/4 inch groups at 50 yards. Do with that what you will. I didn't have a tripod on the gun. I was shooting off a bag, and the rear stock here is very skeletonized, so it's very hard to get a good purchase with my sandbag in the back here. So do with that what you will. I do believe this gun could easily be 1 1/4 at 100 yards. So about 1 1/4 MOA at 100 yards. But when we took this thing out the distance, I was very impressed with how accurate and how consistent it was out to 500 yards. Now, obviously, if I'm grabbing a gun to go shoot 500 yards, The 11.5 LT is not going to be that gun.
You're not that guy.
But if there is a situation in which I need a well-rounded rifle to do a lot of things and I may have to reach out to 300 or 400 yards, this 11.5 is 100% capable of doing so and doing so consistently on a man-sized target. Even with high winds that we had at RPR that day, I was able to get consistent 9 out of 10 hits at 400 yards. Once I figured out my wind hold, it was very easy to use my G45 5X magnifier with the EOTech and get accurate hits on target. Again, just using a range bag in the front and a sandbag in the rear from a bench. Now off a barricade, I was able to easily and consistently get shots at 200 yards with this rifle. Training drills at different levels, going from top to bottom, bottom to top. This thing is an absolute tack driver. And with that weight in the front, with a good cheek well, thanks to this Isle Manufacturing cheek riser in the back, and just posting this thing up in some good form, this gun can outshoot most shooters any day of the week. And I was very impressed with how I was able to take it out to 500 yards, less consistently than 400, but certainly able to do so. Now, if I was running a LPVO on here, a 1-6 or a 1-8, obviously that capability would be stepped up and I could have some more effective and more consistent hits out to 500 yards. One of the most difficult things out at that distance is that 77 grain bullet out of an 11.5 is really getting bullied by the wind at those ranges. So not having wind holds in the EOTech is a bit of an issue. You're kind of holding out into open space. And so again, with just a 5X magnifier and a dot, I'm holding off completely off the target, sometimes a target and a half off to the right of the target for that wind. It's a lot more difficult than you may realize to get those consistent hits at those distances. So now that we talked about what it's like to shoot, accuracy, and its distance capabilities, let's talk very quickly about reliability. This will be a short topic because this thing ran 100% reliable through the 1,000 rounds I put it through. I had zero malfunctions, magazine or otherwise. It had a completely flawless track record as far as reliability goes. So lastly, guys, we're gonna talk about how I have this rifle set up and kind of the reason I have it set up the way it is. Starting blast end to ass end as always. This is kind of the dream setup for me as far as an SBR goes. This is my current nightstand gun. So with that being said, we are running a suppressor on here because anytime you can run suppressed, it's better than shooting unsuppressed. Only guys who don't own suppressors will tell you different. What? This is the Surefire RC2. It is a proven can. It's been used downrange for decades overseas by a lot of guys who shoot a lot better than me. I just always wanted one. Obviously in the tan, it's a whole vibe with the 50 Shades of FDE. So great little suppressor. It is mounted up on the Surefire 3-prong. That 3-prong does have that infamous ping when you're shooting without the can on there. It does ring. It is slightly annoying. You're not shooting fast enough if you could hear that, so shoot faster. Moving back from there, we have the Surefire dual fuel MD640 on here. It is a 1500 lumen light. Not the greatest candela, not the greatest throw or anything like that, but I've had this light for a while. It is super durable. It's set up with the M-LOK direct mount to the Sig MCX M-LOK handguard. So moving back from there on the bottom, we have my favorite little stubby vertical grip. That's probably, you guys are probably used to about that size, right?
Shrink it. Yes!
Samson Manufacturing, Shorty in the Grenade FDE. I really love these vertical foregrips because they're super easy to take on and off. If for any reason you needed to take an accurate shot and you wanted to put this up against the bag up in the front, you can easily remove it and it just threads right back on. It's very simple, it's very robust. It's an aluminum, but it attaches directly to your M-LOK. So it sits very flush and very clean. I just love this thing. It is a little bit heavier, obviously, than like a polymer VFG. Do you need an aluminum vertical foregrip? Maybe not. I just like it aesthetically and it just fits perfectly in my hand. Looks great, feels great, but if you're not so worried about that, hit the curls in the gym and you'll be good. Back from there, we have the Dragon Scale rail scales on here. These are the high temperature polymer. I like the Dragon Scale ones because they're pretty aggressive, just sitting on both sides of the rifle. Big fan of those. We have a Magpul QD slot up here because one of the downsides about the MCX handguard is that it does not have its own QD cups, so you have to put your own. I opted for the top mounted Magpul one there. It's nothing fancy, very solid option. Attached to that while I'm at it, Blue Force Gear Vickers sling, free Larry Vickers. My favorite sling right here. Absolutely love this sling, and once I find something I like, I kind of stick with it. I'm running just Magpul or Blue Force Gear or BCM, QD sling swivels, whatever I can get my hands on. And I do have the Blue Force Gear sling management system. It's just an elastic like sleeve that you put on the sling, and then you can kind of wrap it up, and then if you need it, you just yank on it and it deploys your sling. So nice little sling management system there. Makes it easy, keeps it clean. Now up on top of the gun, we are running an EOTech EXPS 3-2. So that is a 2-dot reticle. The first dot you zero at 50 yards and it's a 5,200 yard zero. And then the second dot is a 500 yard reference zero. Now that is for a 14.5 inch barrel, I do believe. However, it got me pretty darn close out to 500 yards. Maybe I held a little bit higher, maybe I was holding shoulder height instead of middle of the target. So just know that if you're looking into the 2-dot EOTech. They are made and calibrated to specific barrel lengths and calibers. So just look that up before you buy one. That is sitting on a Unity riser, the Unity Fast Riser. Again, everything's an FDE because it's total vibe. That's vibe. I really love that. What the Unity Fast Riser does is it gives you a much more heads-up shooting position, allows you to stay more on a level playing field when you're looking down the optic, and it also makes it way easier to shoot passively with night vision. So night vision is something I'm really trying to work towards right now, and so why not set up my guns to be future-proof, so to speak. And so also to give you the ability to look over any IR laser aiming devices that you may have mounted up on the front of your rail. Behind that is the G45 magnifier, again on the Unity flip to center mount. Pretty cool, just flip straight down, straight up. So no snag points there, and you can see clearly over it into your EOTech. It's got an ADM QD on the side, so if you're not using this, you can pretty easily just take it off, like so, put it in a pouch, stow it somewhere, and make your gun a lot lighter. Like so for home defense, I'm actually not running the magnifier on there, obviously, because it just saves weight and one less thing to kind of be in my way. I always run Magpul mags because they work. And moving back from there, I already talked about the J-Max stock a little bit in the gun overview. And so that pretty much wraps up the way I have this thing set up. That's gonna bring us to the end of the video, guys. In conclusion, should you buy the Sig Spear LT? Is it gonna make you a better shooter? Is it gonna make your dad love you? The answer is no. There's no substitution for training. And if you already own an AR-15, let's say a Mark 18, a URGI, some other variant, maybe you built one yourself with a Frankenstein build with all that drawer full of parts that we all have in our house, you don't need the Sig Spear LT. Now, if you have the money to buy this and also buy ammunition and also buy training courses and get out to the range, then by all means, ball out, baller. Obviously, I got run over by the hype train on this thing. I bought it. Do I regret buying it? No, I absolutely do not, but it did not make me a phenomenal shooter. It is not like any kind of revolutionary, game-changing operating system or caliber. It's just 5.56, guys. It's a heavier front end AR-15, guys. Is it marginally better when you're shooting it suppressed on a short barrel? Yes, but are you really gonna notice if it just sits in your safe all the time and you don't shoot it? The answer is no. In conclusion, should you buy it? Ask your wife. Nah, I'm just kidding. Thank you so much for staying to the end of the video, guys. That's going to wrap it up for today. If you do want to support the channel, there's 3 ways you can do so. The first one is very played out, but liking, commenting, and subscribing. It is very helpful in promoting this in the YouTube algorithm, since YouTube doesn't love what we talk about here. This 29-round magazine, it just pushes it to more freedom-loving, like-minded individuals. The whole goal of the channel is to spread love, spread information on these things, these tools of freedom here, and also just spread the message of loving God, loving your neighbor, and just fucking being a good person, guys. Get out there and train, exercise, eat good, drink water. So yeah, liking, commenting, subscribing is a big help. I really appreciate every single one of you guys for doing so. You can also head over to brownells.com, use bro code RDB10, saves you guys 10% off of $150 or more. And you could buy a weapon light and really make everyone at Wilson Combat want to off themselves because you're running a weapon light on your pistol. Yeah, you should be running a weapon light on your pistol. Public service announcement. Spread it, spread the love, spread the message, and support the channel. Lastly, you can head over to rangedaybro.com, get any merch you might want, t-shirts, hoodies, and there's also the ability to do a super thanks, which is like Patreon, but right here on YouTube, and that is much appreciated. We'll end it at the same day. We'll end it at the same. You guys can save that code, spread the love. Stop smiling, motherfucker. I'm like literally crying right now.